Damir asked me to share some ideas or visions around what is innovation and how to reach it. Since I'm a university, I can only give the perspective from a university point of view, but I try to also highlight a little bit how it's on industry, or how as an academic you contribute to innovation and get a step further. Just to give a very brief background, I work at the Department of Biotechnology in the Delft University, building completely at the end of the campus, the most far away building from IHC, from the university. And we have in the past been working on several processes which are now used in practice. That's the BCFS process for phosphate removal, the Sharon process for nitrogen removal, NMOX process, Nereda process, and alkaline gas treatment. And currently we're working more on resource recovery than on wastewater treatment, and processes and development are a process for bioplastics production, a process for gel type of production. I will come back to camera a bit later, and for peer recovery in the form of vivianite instead of struvite. And of course, over time we have several processes where we started thinking it's a good idea, and we stopped the development after 1 or 2 MSc or PhD students because it was not that useful or good as it's thought. First about innovation, because I want to be rather clear about it. Everybody, it's a kind of buzzword, everybody like to be innovative. All research programs, governmental programs, they all aim, we have to innovate. But for me, innovation is clearly something different than invention. Invention is you get an idea, you might remove phosphate in this way. It's only becoming innovation once that is implemented in society. And that can be in a commercial scale, that can be in a societal utility background, but that application in practice, the implementation in real life is part of the innovation. So as long as things are in universities, they are by definition not innovations. And universities, in my view, don't innovate. They might invent, and together with industry lead to innovations. And an example of that is, which I always use here, membrane bioreactors. I guess most of you know them, but actually the first membrane bioreactor was patented in 1967. It took till around 1990 before membrane bioreactors became really something to be applied in practice. And that was when Professor Yamamoto in Japan thought, instead of having the membrane modules outside the tank, I put them inside the tank. The principle is still the same, but that made it much more economic to make an MBR reactor and made it possible to build them better in practice. So there it's what's the difference between the invention, 20-year struggle by Dor Oliver trying to build MBRs, until really the innovation is made by this crucial step and making it possible to bring it to practice. Which means, and the other thing is, if you really want to change things in practice, you need to have a strong driver to get it implemented. If you come with something which is 10% better, society will not change. You need really significant differences, because if there's too small differences, in principle almost everyone is a kind of, okay, why would we need to change as long as it's there? If a new model of car is only small advance or difference, you will wait till your old car is gone, and so it takes a long time. If you really make something different with a much bigger impact, people might switch cars more easily. What's now important for innovation? On one hand, that's scientific questions, curiosity-driven research. Without curiosity-driven research, on the long run, there's no innovation. There's only improvement of existing systems. You need to understand the technological challenge. What's the problem? What should be improved in society? And you should understand, if you improve a system, how can that be implemented in a right way in the market? And that market might be government dominated with regulations, etc., but you have to understand that market and its dynamics. And it's this combination which leads to innovations. And in this respect, for me, what you would call fundamental research or basic research, I rather call that curiosity-driven research. You're curious about something and you're going simply to investigate, hey, what's happening here? And you do that in the level of detail what is needed in order to satisfy your curiosity. Once you understand that and you see an opportunity, you go to technological research. And that's the same if you have an existing installation and you see, well, I have a wastewater treatment plant and there's a lot of bulking sludge. Let's try to improve it. And that you can do in two ways. You can try just to improve it by seeing what happens if you change something and try to learn from that and improve the process. That's more or less how you learn to drive a car. You learn to drive a car by just trying. Visit someone next to you is a bit under control, but you do not put in all the mechanics, all the things in your head before you start driving a car. You know that at a certain moment, if you steer the wheel a bit or you press the gas, you go with a certain speed, and that's intuition. So you can very well, based on experience, empirically learn how to run a system. But if you want to improve that car, you have to have the curiosity to look under the cap of the motor and see how does that motor work and what's happening in what's the bushie doing there, etc. And then you start to understand what's going on and you can improve it. And that's the curiosity-driven part. Both types of research are good, but for real innovation you will need both. This is an example of our own lab. On one end we are very interested, there are soda lakes all over the world, but somehow we are interested in the ones in Siberia. There are lakes from which saturated sodium carbonate. There are bacteria growing there, and we just were wondering what they're doing there, how they do that. And while doing that research, we saw there's a lot of sulfur bacteria there, and we realized that for removal of sulfur from biogas or natural gas, it's an advantage to remove the sulfur with an alkaline solution. But if you have an alkaline solution and you want then to have the H2S being oxidized and you would have to bring it back to pH 7, you need a lot of acid base to all the time change the pH. It's easier to use these bacteria from these lakes which are already growing at pH 10 to then remove the H2S from this alkaline washing liquid for the biogas and implement that. So that in the end led to the use of the bacteria we found in Siberia, in installations in Canada on the gas fields, to remove H2S from the natural gas and in an efficient way. So in another way, you need curiosity-driven research to generate ideas, to understand what's going on, and your curiosity is the only thing which can bring you to new fields. And that combined with knowledge and understanding the problem, then you have a potential innovation. If you only take, say, knowledge and problem together, that's more problem-solution-oriented research, very useful research, very good to do. But on the long run, you will only improve the existing systems and not find, say, it's something outside the box or outside where you are. So in our case, just as an example, we have been working on several processes, and that always has been a combination between curiosity-driven and application. And so we are interested in the role of biopolymers. Why do bacteria make biopolymers? What's their role? And from that, we understand certain aspects, and we develop processes like granular sludge and biopolymer, in the end, bioplastic production. Nitrogen gap occurring in treatment plants. What's going on there in the treatment plant? Why is nitrogen disappearing? Led to the discovery of Anomox processes. And now the application of that. Understanding why bacteria make a certain form. Why do they grow in a certain form? Understanding in the end what drives bacteria to make a certain either open or porous flock structure or very compact granule led to the further development of aerobic granular sludge. Alkaline microbiology already told, and then we were studying iron behavior in activated sludge, and then realized that maybe Vivianite is a very interesting way to recover phosphate instead of what this more traditional way of recovering it in the form of struva. So that combination is somehow important if you really want to make that innovation step. Now, if we talk about water treatment and we want to do innovation, the other point for innovation is the strong driving force. And if you look at water treatment, people do things for for quite a set of different reasons. And some of them, they are nice, but if you improve them, that will not lead to improvement in implementation of your technology. But for From the water point of view, what is important? These installations are big, try to make them more compact. That's what people want. Certainly in dense cities, not use that space for treatment, but use that space for apartments or other things. Optimize nutrient removal, because the demands are all the time going on. So if you are able to get the nitrogen and phosphate lower than before with some new technology or different ways that will be implemented. Minimize energy consumption. Will also help to implement, to get your technology. Most important one is, of course, cost reduction. As soon as you can make something which is 25% cheaper, you have not much problems with marketing. People will buy it anyway. If you make something which is 25% more expensive, yeah, then people will think 2 times, 3 times, 4 times before they will maybe buy the technology. Some points, they are all the time there in the water field, like producing energy, recovering of nutrients, and decentralization. And you will see in the water field that there's a lot of work on it, and I know also here a lot of work on it. But if you do not put that in the context of these above 5 or 6 points, you will remain with the fact that you might think, I do something very good by recovering nutrients, and complain about then utilities who don't want your technology, although it's so nice to recover nutrients. But if you haven't thought about what it means for energy consumption in the plant, what it means for cost, etc., then you won't go anywhere. So in the Netherlands, there's quite a few plants which recover phosphate, but they don't do that because they want to recover phosphate. That's what they tell the public. The reality is they simply save money in their operation. So in the end, it's economy driven. But it's good to say that they contribute to development goals and other things. That's why you then focus on that. But it's good to understand that, because if you want to get that phosphate removal going, if that's your aim, make sure that that fits in the line of where the managers and the people at the water plant are held responsible for. And they are not held responsible for recovering phosphate. They are responsible for sanitation. They are responsible for doing this at a low cost as possible. So if you integrate what the management or the water boards have to do as a public task, and you integrate what you think is also useful for society, then that merges together and you can relatively easy get technology implemented. And for that's important for innovation, and that's where it usually goes wrong with academia. People in universities, they sit in the university and they think, and they are curious and they find all kind of new things, but they don't understand what happens in practice. And it is because very often there's a kind of linear innovation model, or what governments and institutes go after. That's even here in the Netherlands, it's still that case, usually depicted. You put in some money up front, people start thinking at universities, they develop something, this goes to an institute, and that institute then scales it up and transfers it into the water boards or the utility. The result is that the person at the university who's thinking and getting money does not really know what's going on in practice, because he only hears anecdotes, he might hear some things, and there's not a good link. So the only way it works is in a kind of situation where good interaction is created between universities, technology developers, people who then in the end are going to sell the products on the market, and the people who are in the market. That's the utilities in most cases. Sometimes it's the public for us. And that has to be integrated in some way. You need a kind of ecosystem instead of a linear model where you start here, put in money, get ideas, make the idea in pilot plant, make the pilot plant in a full scale and earn a back. Not that it's hardly working. That's why a lot of things stall halfway, because that good idea is a good idea, but without knowing what the real constraints are in the market, it somehow in that pipeline gets stuck. So it's important to think about it, and you should regularly see that things go wrong in this, what we call cyclic innovation model. And one is, what very often occurs is there a kind of gap between what science is doing and what business needs. And that's partly driven by the fact that scientists, they are busy partly with science, but they also want to do good for society, certainly also in the water field. You want to help sanitation, you want to bring sanitation to everyone, you want to recover nutrients, you want to do this energy neutral, you want to prevent climate impact of the water treatment plant. There's so many things you want to do. But if you don't do that, if you do that and you're busy with it, you can even get quite easily subsidies or funding from all kinds of bodies who want to support good things. But if you forget the market, it will never be implemented. And you will remain in the situation that you say, well, I have a good idea, but yeah, the market is conservative. They don't want me, they don't want to change. Actually, you did not develop your system in a way that it fits in the needs of the society. And needs of society could be regulated, by the way, by governments. It's not only market-driven, but if you do something market-driven, it goes way more quick than if you do something government-driven. You probably all know the situation in Africa quite well, as I can guess. Mobile phones were more or less introduced without too much interference of government, whereas the landline telephone implementation needs the government because of the infrastructure. It goes slow, goes very inconvenient, a lot of errors. While on the mobile phone, people find a way. You don't need too much the government, maybe for some allowance to be send out radio signals, but essentially the system can run on itself and implementation goes much more quick than the landline type of telephone systems. So examples here is mainly things like energy. Energy recovery is an interesting there. A wastewater treatment plant can recover energy. From the wastewater point of view, as long as you recover energy to minimize the total energy cost of the treatment plant, you're on the right side of the scale, because that helps the overall operation of the plant. As soon as you start to try to produce biogas to sell outside the treatment plant, there's nobody waiting for you to get that gas unless you have a very good marketing strategy. But usually the amount of gas you can produce on municipal wastewater is extremely small compared to the amount of gas you can produce, for instance, on the organic waste of the city. So if it's really interesting to make biogas for a city, start with the organic waste, because there is the bulk of the organic material which comes out of the city and not in the wastewater. Simply looking to flows and marketing. Other typical example is the decentral treatment, because there's sometimes the feeling for decentral treatment as being very good. Now, and you see that, well, already for decades. Actually, the first implementations of wastewater in the Netherlands was decentral at the hospital and at the train station and a few small decentralized places, but simply they don't give extra advantage. Mostly it doesn't work there. The only real advantage of decentralized treatment is again that you can do it independent of the government. If you have a local developer, that local developer can on his own plots just secure good water and etc. That's a clear advantage if you have a complicated government system which cannot run big innovation programs. Then decentralized treatment can have a very big advantage. Here in the Netherlands there's been for decades work on decentralized sanitation, and very interestingly there's one nice example here at the treatment plant at the hospital in Delft that was not developed by water engineers. The only successful decentralized implementation in the Netherlands is by PharmaFilter, and that was developed by logistic managers. They were not interested in water, they were interested in improving the logistics in the hospital, minimizing the cost of the transport of things in the hospital, and they realized, oh, we can transport with water instead of with elevators. But then they got the request, well, that's nice, but then you're not allowed to dump that in the sewer. So in order to get rid of some elevators in the building, they in the end built a treatment plant to be able to flush things with water and then just treat the water. And that treatment plant is way cheaper than the elevators for the investment of the hospital. So there's a clear advantage, but the idea and the thing comes from someone who was busy with logistics management, who found the problem, solved it with decentralized treatment, which is now very good because it captures also all the, of course, all the pharmaceuticals, all the pathogens. They're all nicely killed in this system and removed. But the main driver behind this, from the hospital point of view, is that each new hospital saves, they can have maybe 2 elevators less, and that's the most expensive part of building a new building. So showing you need this extra driving force, this advantage. Although the treatment plant, if you think about it, treating hospital wastewater at the hospital, preventing that pathogens and other medical things spread in the environment through to sewer overflows, leaking sewage, etc., is a very good idea. But the extra economic driver is what really implementing it. The other error which occurs is when there's a difference between technological capacity and real societal needs. And I gave you usually membrane bioreactor as an example. This is a typical example where engineers find some nice technology and they really develop the technology, and it's such a nice technology, it's compact, it has all kinds of advantages, but society just wants clean water, and if you cannot, and society is just interested in the way you can make water in the cheapest way, in a clean way. And in this case, it's simply if the costs are low enough, everybody buys a membrane bioreactor because you don't do anything else as what was happening before. And if the costs are not high enough, nobody buys it. And this membrane bioreactor has been, I use this as an example because it was very heavily hyped in Europe in the late, say 2005, 2010. Everybody was saying, well, now we are going to everything will become membrane bioreactors, and that's the new technology because it's way more compact. True, it makes a bit better effluent quality. Not completely true. It makes maybe a bit better, but with sand filtration you can do the same effluent quality. So in the end, what you see in the Netherlands, despite a big hype and a big research program on membrane bioreactors, all the treatment plants which need to go to very low effluent concentration use continuous sand filtration. There has been no hype around it. There has been no not a big fuzz around it. This will be the new technology. Simply, it was the simplest technology because you don't need a lot of maintenance, and it does the same thing as an MBR, except that it's not compact. But the rest, it's the same. It gives the same effluent quality. So in the end, you see that in almost all treatment plants which need to reach low effluent concentrations, sand filtration is used in a kind of innovative way, by the way, not just an old-fashioned sand filter. And MBRs have been built, a few in that hype, and now are not in use anymore, except on one place. I can explain the details. And you see here for MBRs, number of installed installations. And in 2000, 2010, there have been big research programs in Europe, US, a lot of noise, a lot of plants were going to be built, and after 2014, the number of constructed plants is decreasing again because once the few are built, people see the real disadvantages. There's no, like in the Netherlands, there was subsidy for the first implementations to help the technology to get on the market. The government put subsidies on it, but all that didn't help because there's an intrinsic problem. These installations require more energy, while at the same time, due to climate change and all kinds of other things, people want to reduce energy. They need more chemicals, while for a sustainability point of view, you want less chemicals. They need more labor, well, for economic point of view, you want less labor on the plant. So there's a lot of negatives, but during development they are known, but people who develop something say, well, we'll solve it. This is such a good technology, this will become way cheaper, and in the end, that promise is not reached. Not that MBRs are not useful in combination, because there are good applications for membrane bioreactors, but not just as the general tool for municipal wastewater. A very good application, and I can talk about it if you want, but that's for another time. Going back to the cyclic innovation model, I want to briefly illustrate that, how it has been working for two of our development processes. One is Anamox. It's an interesting process. We discovered organisms somewhere early late 80s here in Delft, and where normally you remove ammonia by first oxidizing all the ammonia to 9% of all ammonia to nitrate, and then reducing nitrate to nitrogen gas with organic carbon. This organism, you can oxidize half of the ammonia to nitrite, so you need only 40% of the oxygen, so 40% of aeration capacity, And then this organism takes nitrite and ammonia and make nitrogen gas. So you don't need organic compounds anymore for the nitrogen removal, and these organic compounds can then be used for biogas. So you can optimize your process. Certainly if you have done first anaerobic treatments where you convert organic carbon to methane, then ammonia is left over. Traditionally you would have problems, you would have to buy organic carbon again for the nitrogen removal. With this organism you don't need it. So of course when we discovered this organism, that this exists, it's very clear there's a very big advantage of using it. And we set up a development program with the STOA, which is, say, the research center for the water boards, where provide the knowledge what is happening, how to implement it. With Parks, which is a technology supplier who knows how to construct facilities for treatment systems. And with the Dutch Water Board, who in the end are the customers of the plants, who have to buy the equipment from Parks. And we started this at the time that we only knew we had this organism. We didn't start this when we had already how the process should be. We just started, okay, we have this capacity, let's sit together and let's now try to design the process with these 4 groups together. And that's important, because otherwise we come up with some technology and then later on that reactor is not that ideal, it's not easy to construct or what else, or scale up, etc. And so in the developments, if you look in the literature, before 1980, you find very regular in the literature that people report there's a nitrogen gap if they try to make a nitrogen balance over a treatment plant. Nitrogen disappearing in unexpected way. So likely all this time there was NMOX, because NMOX is present in many systems more or less by nature. But if you don't know what you have to see, you don't see it. You just think it's impossible because people on that time said you need oxygen to remove ammonia. So in the 80s, this also occurred at a plant here in Delft, and not just people here didn't start to report, okay, we have also this unexpected nitrogen gap, but thought, no, you want to know, you're curious to understand what causes this gap. So into it, we found this very special organism, and then started in the 90s to collaborate with Parks and the water boards to really scale this up and bring this to practice. And that took, say, with Parks, we started in 1998 to collaborate, really the development. So it took a while. I can tell again about a lot of problems there, but 1998 we started then development. 2002 was the first full-scale installation, but we did directly from lab to full scale, so there was no pilot plant. But that full-scale installation was effectively the pilot plant, so it took till 2005 till all the problems you get by implementing new technology were solved. And since 2005 this technology is on the market. Parks is currently, say, the market leader. You could say they have about 60% of all NMOX capacity, not all NMOX plants, but all NMOX capacity in the worldwide is constructed by Parks. And this is one of the bigger reactors in China. It's behind an anaerobic digester, wastewater treatment, which is not on this figure, and running already since 2007 or something. No, 2014. No, 2007 in China. They found a way to install equipment in existing tanks in order to be able to use this organism. And currently we're looking to how to implement this, because the technology works very well at warm climate conditions. These organisms are very slow growing bacteria. So at 30 degrees Celsius they might divide every 3 to 5 days, which is very slow for bacteria, which normally divide every hour. So that gives problems, and if you go to lower temperatures, it becomes even less. So then they might divide every 2 weeks. It's a very slow growing organism, and we have to find the technology. We're now working together with the Water Board and Parks, again in that same consortium, to try to implement at full scale municipal wastewater treatment at a low temperature. The concentration is not a problem, but the temperature is a problem. The other technology we are working on that was obviously mentioned before, that's granular sludge. Granular sludge was known before we started to work on this. The point was it was known from anaerobic treatment, methanogenic processes. And there it was discovered by accident. Professor Lettiga was running upflow reactors together with his team and noticed that in these upflow reactors, bacteria spontaneously transformed from flocks in granules. And he realized, because also there a few other people had seen it, but he realized that that granule made an advantage and not just see, interesting, and moved on. He realized that, developed the upflow anaerobic sludge blanket reactor out of it, the USB reactor, and that's heavily used worldwide, certainly again in warmer climates, because also anaerobic treatment has a problem at low temperature. For the same reason, it's a relatively slow growing bacteria. But for aerobic, that's much more difficult, and I will not go into technical details, but at a certain moment in the lab we figured out how to make, what drives bacteria to make granules. And that's, maybe to be very short on that, if you convert water, if you freeze water, you can get hail or snow. It's both water, it's both frozen water, but it looks very different. And the mechanisms which are behind the process which makes that water freezes as snow or as hail are the same mechanisms which make the bacteria either grow as a granule or as a flock. It's not identical, but in principle it's the same. It's a physical process which makes this. It's not the organisms which do it. If it's a physical process, you can engineer it. The point is that for slow-growing organisms it's easy, but because hail is occurring because water freezes relatively slow, and snow is occurring when water freezes water vapor freezes out very quickly. And that's why rapid-growing organisms make flocks and slow-growing organisms make granules. Anyway, we understood how it works. We had only at the reactor we could show, okay, we can make these granules, and we went to the water boards again and say, well, we have to develop this. We made a team in the end with, again, STOA, the research foundation of the water boards, coordination of the water boards, DHV, a consultant company which is working a lot in wastewater treatment, and water board Veluwe as the first one, and a few other water boards followed quite quickly. Again, together we went in there, and the essence comes from granular sludge was known, but from this anaerobic granular sludge, but we were originally interested in granular sludge which were more biofilms. There was a small carrier on which bacteria grow, and our question was what makes now that they make nice and compact structure, and what makes that make an open and porous structure. That led to the insight of, okay, these are the mechanisms which makes bacteria make these granules. And when we understood that, and we understood that we can engineer it, that we're not depending on what the bacteria wants, but that we can engineer the system and tell the bacteria what to do, we can also design a system and convince water boards it's good to work on it, because there is the option to remove all the clarifiers from your plant and save a lot of space, and do this in a way more cheaper way than with membrane bioreactor, because here you don't need to build anything new, you just build less on a smaller space, and no need for investment in separation, because we still use gravity to separate the sludge, because granules settle much more quick than flocks, like hail and snow. Of course, the point is, you can make a much more compact plant, but as soon as it's more expensive, water boards will not pay for land. It's governmental institutes, and the government just claims land. That's not a commercial driver for utilities to be on smaller land. The only driver would be if the town mayor tells them, hey, free up land. But then they will say, well, but we need this land because otherwise we cannot clean the water. And there's no commercial driver for utilities to minimize the land requirements. For industry, that is, because the price of the land is in their books, and their profits are less if they have a big plot than when you have a small plot and produce the same amount of product. And of course, it's nice that you make granules, but in the end you also have to not only make granules, you also have to remove nutrients and other things. So the two more say, technology questions was how can we engineer it cheap and how can we make sure that we also have very good nitrogen and phosphate removal. This resulted, we started the project in 2000, around 2002, around 2005 we made an agreement for 10 years to work together and to build 3 plants. And in 2005, at that moment, there was no technology on the market. So the water boards said we are going to commit that if the development goes well, within 10 years there will be 3 plants running, which is quite exceptional because water boards usually say we will only consider known technology. We somehow could convince them. This is the first plant built in 2012, so within the time limits of this 10 years we had agreed. And the main advantage is there's about 30% less capital needed. So you have much less, 30% less money needed for the investment. So this first plant was built under a fully commercial bidding process, no preference supplier or something like that. The water board has just said anybody can bid on this project. The only thing is we allow any technology as long as the technology provider give the guarantee that it works. So these we bid on the project, guaranteed that they will make sure it works, and won the bid because they were simply cheaper than any competitor. So that's the main driving point now for implementation. There's also 25% energy savings, and that's somehow also important because that energy savings is due to the fact that we have much less mechanical equipment. Now, I know that in the Netherlands, having mechanical equipment, you don't have much problems with our brutto national product and our import-export and the value of our currency. But if you have, as many of the countries where you are originally from or are from, you have problems if you have to buy things in dollars for several $7 million on the international market. It's competing with other imports you can allow as a country. And if you need much less mechanical equipment, it means you need much less import. It's mainly concrete what is used here, and one pump and one blower, and no other recycled pumps, complex mixers, etc. So that's a small extra advantage for some economies. And there's about 70% less space. Now that space requirement is a little bit an advantage, but in most cases, as I said, it's not. It's nice, but it's not the main driver. It's lower cost price. This is the example of the process in the north of the Netherlands. This is the old treatment plant. Actually, this is the old treatment plant, and this is the new granular sludge treatment plant. Simply due to the much better settling, we can build more compact. These tanks are about 40 meters. These clarifiers about 50 meters. This plant gets 50% of the wastewater, and this gets 50% of the wastewater. And the effluent quality here is better than here. It's both good, but one is still a bit better. Showing that there's a really big space-saving aspect on this technology. This was introduced, first plant in 2012, and there are now already 70 plants worldwide, 40 plants in operation and 30 under construction, and there's now another 40 where negotiations are going about for building a plant. So the technology it's already on 6 continents. So you see that new technology can go relatively fast without making too much noise. Simply, it's 30% cheaper, and then there's not much need to advertise and go around. But it's well, in Africa the plants are in South Africa. There are about 3 plants in South Africa. There's about 9 plants in Brazil, in South America. There are 2 plants in the United States. There's 1 in China and 1 in Philippines and 1 in Hong Kong, and there's 2 or 3 in Australia, and the rest is all in Europe. You see it's spreading around quite quickly, and that's nice. And the biggest plant until now is the one in Ireland. That is a plant of 2.5 million population equivalents. It treats more or less half of the whole of Ireland, the wastewater. There was an existing plant which did not work, and that was a very big advantage for DSV in this case, because the existing plant did not work. It was built by some American consultant, and it was really not working, and the wastewater was still going in the bay. So there was a lot of political pressure to do something on it, because nobody likes polluted wastewater in the bay, in Europe at least, and everywhere in the world. Only here the public is more strong in pressurizing them. But that meant that this very large plant could be relatively quickly reconfigured, because this is of course a very huge investment for 2.5 million people, and there's always a risk that something goes wrong. But now this means that the technology is used at the largest scale, more or less, in the world of treatment plants. So if you look to it, how that run, that innovation process, well, somewhere in the 90s we were busy with trying to figure out how does the bacteria make morphologies, how is that morphology going on. In 95 we showed we can make, on the 100% aerobic conditions, we can make granular sludge. Now that was a scientific point, because we wanted to prove that anaerobic conditions have nothing to do with granulation. So we wanted to have 100% aerobic conditions, make granular sludge. It's also the most difficult condition to do it. So if we would have tried to scale up that process we had early, mid-90s, it would have failed, because that was a technology which nicely showed we can do it, but it would have to be done under such conditions that is way too complex for practice. It will be not economical, it will require too much energy. But then at 2000, there have been pilot plants, and in 2006, what was called the Narrator Research Program started, I see now 2006 and 2005. And in 2010, the bidding process for the first full-scale plant started. So that meant in roughly 10 years, we went from lab-scale ID to full-scale implementation, which is relatively fast for municipal treatment technology. And why was this relatively fast? Because it's of course interesting to know that. Well, once it's a relatively simple technology, you can explain it in simple words very quick. That's important. If you have a technology where it takes you too long to explain, well, likely there's something wrong in that technology. You have to be able to say it to understand it in simple ways, also in order to convince people. Because if you go to the water board and you say, well, you have a new technology, and then you need 10 minutes to explain it, the managers at water board, they get bored, and after 1 minute they start thinking about other things and not about your technology. So you have to be able in 1 or 2 minutes to catch their attention and say, okay, this is what it's all about, this is what it is, and get them going, because in the end they have to decide to invest in that whole program for pilot plants, etc. And if it seems for them too complicated, they will not do. There's a big advantage in the Netherlands with the water board system. We have about 20 water boards, and all the water boards find that they have to do things, that they also have to compete a bit with each other, who's doing the most interesting new things. So that helps, because we have 20 players. If one says, well, I don't think it's good, you still have 90 others to go to see if you can get your technology with them. So it's good, there's a kind of market. And it's, for instance, very different with Belgium. In Belgium there's one water board, and essentially there's no development. Because if that one water board says it's not interesting, the Belgian universities have no way to go somewhere else except to the Netherlands. But inside Belgium, they have no, and that's it. And we have, say, 20 chances to convince someone. It's patented, and I will come back to the patents later. We developed this national research program to make sure that everybody felt owner of it, and we would all work together. That is not the TU Delft who does it, that's not DHV who does it, not the water board who does it, but that is a community who does it with the right people there. Not people who are just friends or who you like to work with, but those people you need to have there in order to develop the technology. Not always that easy, because you have then sometimes to say to good friends, well, I'm sorry, but you're not in this program, but because your expertise is now not needed. But otherwise, you're not working to get it done, a job done. We could convince the water board to commit for 10 years, which is quite exceptional, because that was really exceptional, because usually water boards will say, well, let's look for 1 year, and then we have a go-no-go meeting, and then they're gone. So somehow we were able to convince them, this is new, this is going to be great, commit yourself for 10 years, and no in-between evaluations if it goes well or not. So we have no go-no-go meetings and other things, just we will go for 10 years and we will deliver. And what is also important, and that's important to mention, because we are always seen as the Delft did it, but actually Helle van der Roest was the guy who really put everyone together. He worked for DHV, and he was you need someone in such a team who take the leadership, who has the time, the enthusiasm to keep everybody going in the same direction. And you need that, and that's also why it's important, from my point of view, if we develop new technologies, I don't look to which industry I'm going to work with. I look to which person I'm going to work with. Because if I want to convince a government or I want to convince an industry to work with me on a certain project, I need someone in that organization who is as enthusiastic about the project as myself, and who is so enthusiastic about it that he dares to go to the top management if the middle management says, well, we have to think about it. You need someone in the organization who dares to bypass the middle management, goes to the top management and tell, we have to do this. That's the only way to convince them. If you, once you have status enough, you can go yourself to the top management, but if you're too young, that doesn't work. So hell was very important there. There's also field factors, and that was not in the radar, but there's from academic development or research development, also engineers who develop something, few things which go wrong. One is losing your child. That's what you see with a lot of people who develop something. You're busy with it for a few years, and at a certain moment the technology is growing, and then comes the moment that you have to say goodbye to your child. Because if you keep on it, the technology will not grow, because you are not the one who can make the next step. If we would have said as TU Delft, well, we worked on it, we now know it, we are going to develop it and not turn it over to DHV, it would not have grown that big. And that is the kind of, you have to get loose. That means also you have no control anymore. You're sometimes frustrated what DHV does or the other does, but that's the only way to go. And that's where quite often technology remains limited, that the inventor thinks, I have such a good idea, I want to protect it and I want to make sure it gets somewhere, and is too protective, and the child doesn't grow because of overprotection. The other thing that's for general universities, and those of you who are not in university are not bothered by it, but if I go to my higher management and they ask me what they did, they find it very nice if I develop a technology which is applied in practice. But they say, well, that's nice, but how many papers did you write? What are you going to do? So the organization finds it nice, but you're not rewarded for it. The universities, they like to put it in the press, but in the end, it's not where you're judged on. So you have to be able, as an academic, to combine both. Now, if you do things because of curiosity-driven research leading to practice, it's actually not a problem, because the curiosity-driven research automatically, as a kind of byproduct, generates papers. Because if you do well curiosity research, you always find something new. And then it's not that difficult to publish. But it's a complicated factor for certainly academic research. You would like to do things in practice and help people in practice to develop new sanitation and new concepts. Because you need to manage that process. And from a university point of view, if I need money from the Science Foundation, the Dutch Science Foundation, as soon as there's a pilot plant, they will tell, well, there's a pilot plant, there's obviously no research needed anymore. Because they still think in this linear model of innovation. They think, well, okay, all the research has been done, why do you come and ask money at the Science Foundation? If you try to tell them, no, we're working together and we just start to learn, but we want to do this together, very difficult to get money. It will be just complete out. So from a university professor point of view, it's much more interesting to have a promising technology than having an established technology. Because a promising technology, you can get research funding. An established technology, the companies say, well, yeah, we're too busy, we have no money at the moment. They will all the time claim for some reason that they don't want to support you anymore. Not totally non-supported, but they will not really finance new technology. So that's another small problem to get things out of academia. Some professors remain with that technology because they simply see I can generate research money with the promise. Okay, I'll leave it. So what's the really crucial step for Narrator, but also for Animox, is if you have an idea about a process and you go to someone in practice and you say, I have this idea. That guy or girl in practice will tell you this is not going to work. By definition, almost, they will tell you this is not going to work. And if they tell you like that, you should not stop. You should then try to figure out why it's not going to work. You should go in discussion and try to find people in practice who explain you what is not good and be open to that critics. Because if you then are able to find a way around it and see, okay, this is what will not going to work, but we can solve that, you can improve your technology in an early stage and make it in a way that it's adaptable. That's what we also did with Nereda. We went to the ESV, we said we have this nice granular sludge, it can all be more compact. And then you go and design a plant based on the way the reactor was running in the lab. And then you see, well, this will become maybe 1.5, 2 times more expensive than a normal plant. There's all kinds of things which are there. But once you know where the bottlenecks are and the problems are, you can solve them. So that's why in an early stage making a real full-scale design, certainly if you think about centralized systems, understanding what is wrong, solve these problems before you do a pilot plant, then you can immediately do the pilot plant in a way that it fits the system. And that is what was probably also the biggest thing which speeded up the process, that we did this. And that's also that we could convince the water boards to work with us and promise to implement technology if it is successful. This meant that we were in the water boards not only talking to the people who are traditionally busy with R&D, but at the same time we were talking to the people who are traditionally building the systems. And they think very different than the people who do R&D, because they only look if it's possible. And they don't look if it's nice or interesting or maybe a good development. They only look, will the screw fit there or not, and if the screw doesn't fit, it will not work. And so you get these comments back and you implement them very early, and that feedback is very important for quick innovations and quick developments. I think I skipped this slide. About patents, we apply for patents. As soon as we think that we have an idea which is interesting, we apply for patents. This is for 2 reasons. If you want to talk with industry, you're not taken serious until you have a patent. So it's managers, they think, so with the engineers you can always talk, but in the end you have to talk to managers who have to free up the funds. And they are sensitive, oh, is it patented? Then they feel more secure to give you funding than when it's just an academic publication. And that was the same here, because these patents, they were acquired in 1999 and 2003. The first plant is only there in 2012, so by 2016, 17 now, the patents are gone. You have a long development, and in the end, you, as an inventor, you have hardly any benefit from revenues from the patent. But if you would not have patented it, the management of DHV would not have agreed to invest 10 years of development. They would have said, yeah, but then we develop it and everybody can use it. I told them, no, because I'm quite sure that you're going to develop something which nobody else can that easily copy. But the managers will not believe that. They feel more secure. We have a patent, so we are the knowledge owners. And to convince higher managements in organizations, etc., that's why we take patents. Not to make business for the university, not to get personal income. It is a way to convince the process, to get the process going for implementing things in practice. And this is, of course, different because we are dealing with processes. We're not dealing with products. With products, you can make a patent, have it next year on the market, and have 15 years to get revenues from your patent. For processes, it takes 10 to 15 years to get something on the market. So forget about any revenue you get out of it. So the patents were transformed. In our case, we transferred patents to DSV in 2012. And since 2014, we will get royalties, and we made a deal with DSV that we will get royalties for we use them for our research, not till the end of the patent, but till 2026. That's the year I go to retire, so I've secured some research funding for myself. So without that patent, I'm sure we would not have convinced DSV to be a partner here. That's and of course, the development didn't stop, just a few more minutes. So because we gave, say, the technology, or we worked with them to develop the technology further. We still do research on the technology, but we then got interested in not only under which conditions do these bacteria make granules, but also to try to understand why and how, especially how these bacteria make these granules. And then you have to look inside the granules. And if you look inside the granules, there's an electron microscope, you see the bacteria are embedded in a kind of network of polymers. So we got intrigued by the polymers and see what's there. And that leads to a next interesting development, because these polymers, they are gel-forming polymers. Now, all gel-forming polymers, they are bio-based. There's no gel-forming polymer which is oil-based. And all gel-forming polymers have to harvest from animals, plants, etc. So all the gelatin which is on the market is not, there's nobody growing pigs to produce gelatin. It's the waste product from meat production. Meat is produced, that's where it's demand to, and what's left over, the bones, they are used to produce gelatin. There's much more demand for gelatin, but you're not going to grow pigs just to produce gelatin. And that's for alginate, that's for carganon, that's for for agar. They all have to be harvested, and there's no agriculture for it, etc. So it's an interesting thing, because in the wastewater treatment plant, we can produce that same gel-forming polymer, a different one again than all the others, but gel-forming, which is the reason why people want to have it, but at production volumes which are much bigger. So I'm not sure whether you know alginate, but alginate is a polymer which is harvested from seaweed. And with the current 70 treatment plants, we produce already 2.5 times more alginate than the worldwide alginate polymer than the worldwide alginate production. So we can produce a resource out of wastewater, which has a high value because there's no competition with oil. If you produce bioplastics, you compete with oil, but here no competition with oil. And in volumes, which is significant. If you recover phosphate from wastewater, you contribute to 2% of the total phosphate flow in the world. So you have no impact on the market. Here, you are a very big player on the market if you recover this from wastewater. The current price levels of these type of polymers are around €5 per kilogram. And if you understand activated sludge, there's about 20% of this polymer in the Nereda sludge. So it's if you can get €1 per kilogram for your sludge, that's a nice value for the sludge you produce at the treatment plant. You can run your treatment plant on it, and you would save cost. That's why we looked to it. Moreover, we found that this polymer has all kind of interesting characteristics which were not realized before, because we realized if we're going to produce this polymer, we can create a volume which is much bigger than the existing biopolymer market. Now, the existing biopolymer market is limited by supply. There's simply not enough biopolymers produced. But now we can start to produce amounts which will really enlarge the biopolymer market. That will mean the prices will drop unless we find new applications. So we looked at new applications. One of them is a material which looks like shells called nacre. And that's a material people have been trying to make for a long time. It's where crabs and the shell of crabs and shrimps are made of. It's a very special material, and until now it was not possible to reproduce that characteristics of that material with oil-based polymers, but we found a way to do that with this material. And so this is made out of the slime of the treatment plant sludge, and this is the normal oyster shell. So that means we can now make a material which was not available yet. We now have to find good applications, but one of them is application to replace fiber-reinforced polyester. We also found that these polymers are not burnable. Now, it's biological material, not burnable. Intuitively, it might feel strange, but if you think about it, wool is also a non-flammable material. If you have woolen clothes, that will not burn. If you have nylon or others, if you have a flame there, it will burn. So there's more biological materials which are not flammable. But that's important, and it has a strength which is well above the normal polymers. So it is a high performance material, and this is earrings made out of wastewater sludge, and where normally if you recover material from wastewater, people have something, it's coming from wastewater. If I show these earrings made out of the slime of a wastewater treatment plant, people don't have that yuck factor that it's coming from the they want to have a copy of it. So that's also showing that you can make materials out of waste which have value and where people feel appealed to. So currently we're developing that polymer, and we can do this in a big team, partly the same. Again, the water boards, research foundation, some water boards which are front runners, which are now implementing the technology. Ascoding DSV, mainly for implementing downstream processing, the recovery, and Chaincraft and Slimy Green Stuff for making new products out of the polymer, because now we're going outside the water field. If this can only become successful if we integrate with companies which can take the polymer and now make these earrings and start selling them. And we are currently at the transition stage. So the first plant is under construction. These are Nereda reactors. This is the extraction factory which is running at the moment. This was during construction, but will officially be opened in October this year. We made a nice name for the polymer because it's something different than all other biopolymers, and of course it's commercially nice to link it very strong to Nereda. So we found there Kaumira as the name, and that's a name for chameleon in Maori language. Don't ask me why they went that far to find it, but it came from the fact that we can use these polymers in many different ways. So it has many different shapes, many different forms, like a chameleon that can adjust it to its surroundings. And the reason for the water boards to work is again purely economically driven, because we get additional sludge reduction on top of normal digestion with about 20 to 35%. The biogas production remains more or less the same at the plant, so despite that we recover the polymers during the extraction, we destruct the sludge, make it much better digestible. That's why the methane production, the biogas production remains the same. Sludge production goes less, and sludge production is 1/3 of the cost of a treatment plant in the Netherlands. So if you reduce that, direct cost reduction. Then they hope that there is a positive earning model. I'm not completely sure. I say that I think it's possible that if you recover that polymer, they can get a price for it which could balance the running cost of a treatment plant, which would be good, because that would mean that you only need to invest in the treatment plant, but you don't need any more taxation or other things to run the treatment plant, because then the treatment plant can simply do the running cost, the salaries and the energy from the sales of the polymer. And that would make a centralized facility more independent from governmental structures, because it's then becoming more independent from tax systems. And of course, the water boards find it very important. They do resource recovery from wastewater and they contribute to the circular economy, but they would not do the last 2 points if they would not save money. That's is a very clear case. Again, it's nice to do it, but we only do it if there's money involved. But it shows again, if you see that you can bring things in that way, you get things introduced, and where, like for phosphate recovery, there's a lot of research, a lot of people busy. We have to recover phosphate, try to advertise for it, say it's conservative, nobody wants it, it's the economy in the end. And here you come with a product which has a value, which we can convince people, and then we started around 2012, and now 2019 was the first, say, demo scale, and probably also the first product on the market. So important for innovation, that's of course the curiosity-driven research. As an academic I have to advertise that, but I think that's also why I'm at the university, because I like to investigate things and get that, and I also like then to use that knowledge to implement it somewhere. It is important to partner in a good way in an early stage. This is not easy, because you have to convince people. But it is important if you really want to drive what you find in the lab into practice. And you need to be very clear about leadership. And that's somehow important. That's why I've mentioned this before. If you think about building a team, how to build new technology and innovate, you need one person in that team who is trusted by all the partners and who is driving the show. Because if you have these 4 equal parties who all the time start to discuss on their equality, it's not going to work. You need one leader who has the trust and can get the push through, of course, and has the commitment. And the last one is a very good problem definition, because sometimes definitions are not very good. I was recently talking with a company who is active in Africa, and they are in water scarce areas, and they are based on agricultural production. And they said, well, we want to become, we want to really reuse our water, and for reuse, they would have to remove sodium carbonate from the water because the sodium levels were too high for irrigation. And they had already defined a problem as we would like to reuse our water in agriculture. Now, if you're in a water scarce area, there could be all kinds of other applications for water than just reuse in the agriculture. They would only contribute maybe 1% to the water need of agriculture, so they have no impact. They could also think of using that water for another local industry who needs water, or making good drinking water out of it, or other things. And that formulation of a problem in real terms, what you want to achieve, and not in the first problem you might hear from the local engineer, helps to come to new situations instead of just trying in the same way where everybody has been thinking. And if everything is correct, if you're the tense thinking about a problem, you will not think about something new. So you reformulate a problem and you might think about something new. Okay, with that, I have spent probably time enough to get you into lunch. Thank you.